Well, hello, and welcome to Opal City Confidential, a Starman podcast. It's me, Ross Aiken. We're here to talk Adventure Comics 63 and Starman Volume 2, Number 2. And I have a guest this week who's going to discuss Starman Number 2, Paul Hicks for Dial F for Flanger. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ross. I got so excited when I saw you were on Twitter saying you're going to do this show because, Starman is a very, very rich subject for a podcast. So, I love to see someone do it properly and thoroughly, and all the nooks and crannies, and that's what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. I think that's why I love it, is because I was that kid who laid down in the living room, read the encyclopedia. When I got into comics, I memorized lineups and stuff like that. That there was a writer that I felt would, I read this and went, this is so deep, and it's such great world building that you can't cover Jack, which is really what I'm ultimately doing, is covering Jack, because to me he is the greatest of all the Starmen, and his story is just so rich. But it's rich because James Robinson and Tony Harris wrapped everybody else up in it.
Yeah.
I'm a Roy Thomas fan. I'm Paul Levitt's fan. You know what I mean? And there's something about Chris Claremont. I like Chris Claremont, and there's something about those writers that want to build a world from scratch. And this one is just so above and beyond. So I'm looking at next week. I'm going to be covering the first two Prince Gavin stories.
Yeah,
and I remember my brother, huge Ditko fan, handed me those. You're going to like this, and I was like, I don't really like Ditko, Huey. I'm not, I appreciated Spider-Man's Doctor, but he's not, I wasn't a big fan of his '70s stuff. And I read it and went, never mind. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're going to be doing Starman Volume 2, Number 2, which was released on the 20th of October, 1994. Cover date December 1994. It was edited by the amazing Archie Goodwin. Cover art was, it's a stunning Tony Harris, everything, pencils, inks, colors. I do love his painted covers. It's written by James Robinson, pencils Tony Harris, inks Wayne Van Grawbadger, colors Gregory Wright, and letters John Workman, and has been reprinted 3 times now. This Starman, the first Starman trade, which was Sins of the Father? Sins of the Father?
It was Sins of the Father, yeah.
Sins of the Father. In Omnibus Volume 1, which was, I did not realize that it had a second printing. Showing here that it had one in 20. Mine's the first printing, 2008. I just thought this only got the one printing. And now the compendium.
Actually. They did a paperback of the first omnibus, I believe.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay,
yeah.
Now I remember seeing that, or someone saying that's what they had because they couldn't. I saw the hardcovers on Amazon. It was like, crap. There goes money. Because I like a nice big hard. I'm one of those people. I had a guest on called David Banks, who does all the color remastering of the Micronauts. Now he's doing ROM, and he did Aztec Ace. He was on the show, and he calls it, people who like the nice hardbacks and the omnis, it's shelf porn because it looks good up on the shelf. Yeah, I do. I've started to collect omnis, and I need an intervention. I got a Fantastic Four one today that I got for like 30%. I was like, all right. Mm-hmm. So, but let's get to Starman. Before we start going through this, let me get your comic book origin. How did you become a comic fan, and how does an Australian become a fan of DC comics? Because I don't understand I don't know what Australian comic industry is like at all. I have no concept of it. And how did you become a Starman reader? So, before we get started onto Starman number 2, let's get your origin story as a comic reader and how you became a reader of Starman.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to read comics as a kid, but I wasn't allowed to. Basically, I mean, I would get the Christian comics that my mum would give me. I would get innocuous comics like Disney ones and things like that. But anything that looked cool or there's a chance of a thrill, not allowed to read. So yeah. But like all people, I eventually just grew up and had my own money, and then I sort of my first job, there was a couple of dedicated comic shops in Sydney, in the city. So I would travel into there and just started buying what looked interesting. So this was about 1987, and DC looked really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So started
Well,
picking things up. Yeah. Every time I tried to Marvel, it's like, well, this is issue 300 and something, and I don't know who all these people are. And my God, there's a lot of words. So, yeah. So DC won pretty much straight away. So I picked up the first Will Payton Starman run. So I was all over that. I collected that to its ending. And I had some awareness of James Robinson from interviews in Advance Comics and previews or whatever it was called back then. And yeah, he just seemed really interesting, but I didn't connect the fact that I was actually enjoying Firearm already. But I was at a con, and some guy who may know what he was talking about, Archie Goodwin, hand sold Starman to me.
really?
Yeah,
That's very cool.
Yeah, he said this is coming out. And showed me a black and white, photocopy of the first of the Zero issue, and said, it's coming out. And I just said to him, look, I'm not really into occult stuff because of the Zodiac jacket. And he went, no, it's not like that. It's all about, and basically pitched the series to me. And then he said you should go read The Golden Age, which I had avoided as well. And Archie Goodwin knew what he was talking about, and it was very much my jam. And I think my love of James Robinson really drove my comic collecting for many, many years after that. And, it drove me onto the internet. Like, the main reason I wanted to get onto the internet was to participate in, DC message boards. I knew James Robinson was on Twitter, so I wanted to get onto Twitter when that started. So all that sort of stuff. Yeah, and over the years, there's been ups and downs with James Robinson's writing, but I have always loved Starman. So and I feel like this is what everyone's going to say. I mean, you're going to have guest after guest saying, yeah, I bought all the issues, and then I bought the trades, and then I bought the omnibuses, and etc. I'm not going to buy the compendiums because I'm at the point where I kind of want my comic collection to shrink rather than grow.
Not yet. I understand that. I used to have about 30 long boxes. I've got like 5.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about selling them. And I get the trades. I got the compendium, so if I want to travel and read it, because I do have the omnis and I don't want to mess them up. And also I can lend it because I used to lend comics and books to people and go, read this, you may like it. And I turned my best friend, she started reading Batman and Green Arrow in the 90s and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I got them. It's just and being a Starman fan, the people who are Starman fans are hardcore Starman fans, I think, to a great level. I mean, it's kind of one, I'd always said I would love to do this one day, but I don't know if people come to this series later on. That's why I'm hoping the compendium gets a whole nother batch of people to like it. And I think it's something that if you're DC versed, you'll really get a great deal of pleasure out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I've given a trade to someone, probably in the 2000s, and they were like, this, I'm not really into early Vertigo. And you go, it's not Vertigo. And, but I think if you can't get down with James Robinson's writing voice, then you just can't. So, some people, it just feels dated. I mean, maybe they're, more 100 Bullets people, or, scalped. I don't know, but some things just don't work for everybody. But I think you need to love superheroes as well.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that makes the series magical is you love the DC universe, you love superheroes, and you love legacy. So
Yeah, that's a big thing. Is one I think why I like it so much. One of them is the legacy part because I knew who Ted Grant was, and I had grown up reading. My brother handed
Ted Knight.
Oh, Ted Knight. Ted Knight. Why do I always I'm screwing it up? The other uh, Ted Knight. I always liked Ted, but he wasn't never the big guy in the team in the crossovers. He'd appear once in a while, and I'd read the Brave and the Bold and Showcase team ups because my brother had those and said you'll like these. They're by Gardner Fox and Murphy Anderson, and they're amazing, and they're I think they're better written than a lot of comics of their era. But it was just I've always liked complicated super team kind of books and big casts, and that gives me that. Starman gave it to you, and Robinson's writing. I'm a big fan. I had read Golden Age because I'm a big Justice Society fan, and I read it, and it blew my mind that it was just a superhero comic. I mean, it was a superhero comic, but there's a lot more going on.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, I remember because I was working at comic shops in like the late 70s, went to college, and then came back and worked in a couple more comic shops in my early 20s, and just after Crisis. And the 80s was a big change in superheroes. Alan Moore, Gaiman, Robinson. I think a bit too. And this is because this came out in the 90s, where I think 90s comics, guys flying around with big guns, lots of pockets. Marvel, everybody had a leather jacket. But this was just a little more old school.
Yeah.
And a little pulp. More so than there's so much stuff going on, and there's Western stuff, and there's science fiction, and there's there's introspective stuff. I'm from a huge family, so when Ted and Jack have issues, if it wasn't me and my dad, it was one of my brothers and my dad, So, and you get the dynamic. And my dad was a little larger than life. He was a general.
Oh.
Yeah. He was a Marine general, and he was a very sweet guy. And from New York, grew up poor in New York, and became a general. But it was also, if your dad's a general, everybody knows it, And growing up in DC, everybody's dad was in the military or the government.
Yeah.
But your dad was a general, and we're like, yeah, it's just the guy that built my bike, And,
yeah. Well, I mean, your dad could beat up everyone else's dad, officially.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. He was best way to describe my pops was he looked like Sean Connery and sounded like Larry King because he had this high squeaky Brooklyn accent. But so I kind of got it, and and as I said, I'm a big Justice Society fan. So this is, and by about 20 issues in, I had a new favorite DC character.
Yeah.
I'd been a Green Arrow person from when I was a little kid, and this came out when I was about in my 30s, and I went, well, Ollie, you're second now, because I fell in love with this. But let's just kind of go over this. I'll put the synopsis here, and let's just kind of go through. So here is the synopsis from the DC database. So let's get going. The story opens in Jack's apartment, where he goes to gather his thoughts and get ready to battle the Mist's henchmen. He leaves his apartment via the rooftops in an attempt to evade the henchmen, but finds them waiting for him. He battles his way through, only to have a near-fatal encounter with a woman who introduces herself as the daughter of the Mist, sworn enemy of Ted Knight. She mysteriously lets Jack go, and he makes his way to his old neighborhood haunt, the Alley. Wandering through the street, he happens upon a shop that is new and unfamiliar to him. He enters in hopes of finding a short respite from the fights with Miss Henchmen. And also to satisfy his curiosity, inside he meets the owner, Charity, who makes a living as a fortune storyteller. After some casual conversation, he prepares to leave when Charity divines his future fighting the bad, and alludes to the trip to the east, a burial, outer space, a special night at the circus, and a visit from a wingman to Opal City. He leaves the shop and goes to visit his father in the hospital, where he gets directions to a warehouse containing a prototype cosmic rod, one of the first cosmic rod. It's quite a bit larger than the other one he'd recently lost to a henchman. Instead of its larger size being a detriment, he finds this rod to be a better fit for him and his retro look more to his liking. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, the Mist has been having meeting with the Shade. The Shade agrees to help the Mist with his vendetta against Ted Knight by abducting him from his hospital bed. On arriving back at the hospital, Jack finds that his father has been abducted and receives a call from the Mist. He informs Jack that his father will only be released if he agrees to the Mist conditions to be revealed in the next issue. I love how this one starts. It starts with Jack building a costume.
Yeah.
And he says he's not. But he's also telling you exactly why he's picking each item. And Robinson can be very flowery. You know, there's a lot of he's going to put some text on the page if he thinks you need to understand why someone's doing what they're doing. And I like that it's not just narration boxes, that most of the time it's someone is narrating, whether it be Jack or Shade or someone else. And I just like how that one, Tony Harris, is that the first 2 pages is, you know, the first page is like 8 panels, and then you get the title card page, or the what would be the traditional splash page, and it's Jack in what we're going to now know is his costume.
Yeah, and it looks like he's in his store because he's got, you know, collectibles all around. You know, it reminded me, like, my wife loves antiquing, and when we were in America, we went around, looked at lots of sort of antique warehouses, you know, and they had big things and small things and, you know, badges and all that sort of stuff. And it reminds me of that. So, yeah, it makes sense to me now in a way that it didn't the first time I read it.
Yeah, and Robinson, he'll talk in the forwards in some of these books and in the letter pages, because he would write in the letter pages that he was a collector of things.
Yeah.
Like a lot of comic book people are. You know, I explained to friends when I had a room in my apartment that was nothing but comics, you know, floor to ceiling. And they're like, what? It's just, you do it. You want to have the run. You want to have a complete set. You know, they're ones I have read over and over and over again. But yeah, I like that. It is. And you get to see kind of Jack's taste. He's got that great mummy poster. He's got what looks like a Southeast Asian, like jade or something, floor statue. I don't know what it is. My dad brought some back when he went to Southeast Asia in the 70s. We had these vase and little statues of stuff he had picked up. It reminds me of that. But and then, you know, like he has the tin star. It's like something from a Cracker Jack box. I'm like, and the leather jacket, which I love. I saw that they actually made they made a piece of memorabilia, whatever, collectibles of the star.
Yes.
So I'd never seen it, but I saw it on eBay the other day when I was was looking around for cheap omnibuses, and I had Starman was one of my searches, and I showed up. I was like, yeah, it was like $200. I was like, that's neat, but it's just a silver star. But I like that. I mean, I always liked how he put the costume together, and then it wasn't a costume, but you know, it serves that. And then we get to see the Mist. The next scene is the Mist and Shade. So let me ask you something. What do you think of the Shade as? I mean, because other than Jack, I think he's probably the second most important character maybe in the series.
The Shade is the secret sauce of the series, really. I mean, if you can't get down with the Shade, then, you know, this book, it just isn't going to work for you. And yeah, I love his just his wryness and his, you know, casualness about, you know, his approach to evil. Like, I mean, in this conversation with the Mist, you know, the Mist just, you know, relishes doing evil. You know, they say that they killed someone. He says it was Ted Knight Wildcat, and he goes, "Oh, actually, it was the was it the
The
Invisible
Invisible
Hood?
Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, you can see the Mist gets off on this sort of stuff, and you know, the Shade has that sort of detachment about it, and you know, he just sort of wants to be stylish about his approach to everything. So you know, and I think it's interesting that in the book, really, the Shade is not like, they don't play with is he a good guy, is he a bad guy for very long. You know, they pretty much draw the line and says, you know, he's not exactly on the side of the angels, but he's not going to be on the side of the devils either. You know,
No, he's yeah,
he's on his own side. Yeah. And
yeah,
they don't leave you wondering that.
no, you don't. And I think you get what I always got from it was, uh, he wasn't. He when he goes out into the rest of the world, he does things to entertain himself.
Yeah.
He's a thief and a baddie because he likes to challenge. You know, he likes to challenge the heroes, and he likes pretty things, and he likes money to support his immortal lifestyle, I get. But he's never a baddie, and he'll never let anyone harm Opal because it's the one place in the world that it's his home. He came here in the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
And has always kept a presence there.
Yeah, and all this gets teased out as the series goes on, rather than being dumped straight at once. But you know, like, you can tell when he says to the Mist, I'm sure they get us mixed up too, the villains, you know, because we get the heroes mixed up. And then there's just a pause where it's like he's waiting for a reaction or a bit of humanity from the Mist, and it doesn't come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is just also the first hint that something's wrong with the Mist mentally.
Yeah.
That he can't remember things. And they kind of drive that point home, because when the Shade pauses and the Mist finally goes, "The years have been kind to you, Shade. You don't appear to age much." And he goes, "I don't age." And, oh yes, I forgot. You know that. And then we get back to Jack being an action hero. So for somebody who does not want to be a superhero, he's incredibly. He has no problem running atop the rooftops of Opal City.
Yeah.
And his father, being a smart superhero, taught his children to defend themselves, because you never know when a bad guy's going to come and try. Because his dad's so well known that there is no secret identity. Everybody knows who he is, especially in and we're getting to see the doll man, or the ragdoll masks on this gang, and Jack wearing the ragdoll T-shirt that will become kind of important later, or will be a hint to something coming up later. And very much a take on the wearing of what was the big stink of then? Oh, so kids were wearing Che Guevara T-shirts or Charles Manson T-shirts.
Yeah, before that, yeah.
And but it's a great sequence. I love Harris's art, and I love that every time we're outside in Opal, Opal's is such a big character in the series that it makes what Harris has designed makes the story a little more vibrant, or just a little more catchy. And I really do like his art. When you were reading this originally, let me ask you about that, because I'd listened to your show when you talked about Starman, and you talked about the art's it's not really traditional comic superhero art, or especially not superhero art of 1999, or the 90s.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's an attention to architecture and the background and the settings and things like that. Like, this isn't phoned in at all. I mean, the backgrounds, there may be very few details, but there are details, and they really sell. This is a weathered building on the rooftop side of it, and you can see the walls have pock marks, and there's cracks and things, and Tony Harris is always shifting the angles to maximize the effect of the action and what's going on. So, there's a camera tilt when Jack is doing jujitsu to make him look cooler. And when he's taken someone out. He's standing there with his tongue out as though he's exhausted but very pleased with himself.
Yeah.
And the whole way through, it just couples really well with the inner monologue that he's doing, because he's like doing cool things, but there's all this the self-doubt and personal recrimination about what he could have done better and things like that. And from what I know of James Robinson, that's very James Robinson. Like, he is a man that's just filled with doubts about what he's doing.
Yeah.
But trying to do his best, but always thinking it's not good enough. And he said many personal ups and downs, and this seems to be reflected in the characterization of Jack. Like, he's really riding with his heart on his sleeve about what it's like to be Jack.
Yeah, that's what I really like about it. This Jack is we're in the third issue, and you have a feel for Jack. We really,
Yeah.
And the good thing is Jack's not static.
Yeah.
I tried to explain this to my wife. She was asking me about it when I said I'm gonna start doing it. She knew this character is important to me. There are action figures in a bookshelf in our living room of like several different Starmen. And I said it's because it's the hero's journey. He doesn't want to be a hero. He has to be a hero. He accepts being a hero. He goes on a grand quest, and then he stops being a hero.
Yeah.
And it's not like Superman and Batman. He's not the he's not the immigrant. He's not the scared orphan.
Yeah.
He's just a guy protecting his family and his city at first, and then all the other stuff comes. And since he's such a human character, and because Jack makes Ted such a human character too, and all the other characters are very, the O'Dares all have their thing going on. Yeah. Shade's got his thing, and then as more characters come in, they add to the flavor. But it's always how it affects Jack and how Jack interacts with them. And
and you get to see Jack being, pompous and elitist and a bit of a wanker, the way he deals with people. He genuinely thinks he knows more about people, about things than other people. And who as a comic fan can't relate to that?
It's that the snarky little nerd person. Oh, how do you not know this? It's like the characters on Big Bang. I got a buddy who doesn't like them because it's like it makes us look bad. And I said, well, we made ourselves look bad. Okay, it's an exaggeration, but I ran comic books in the '80s. It was worse. But I like how we transition into his first meeting with Nash, the Mist daughter. I think this is a great scene because he has no idea who this is until, the end of the conversation. And that and I remember when I first read it, that she lets him go.
Yeah.
That, I hate you because my father hates your father. And that's what families kind of like, basically saying, that's what families do.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great scene. And I like how that she is, she's in black and white.
Yeah.
And he's in color in those 2 pages. And then how her face kind of fills up panels a bit. I love her as a character, and I kind of screwed it. As weird as their relationship is throughout the series, it's all earned. She's again, she's a little bit deeper than your average comic book villain. So, I'm a fan of the Mist. The Mist family. She's pretty bad. I don't know how to describe it, but there's a reason for why she's bad.
Yeah. Well, when this first appearance, she has a stutter. She's, sort of non-committal about what she's doing and why she's doing it, and seems very reluctant. So, and that's going to get fixed after this first arc.
Yes, this is. I like that how early on the arcs were these really kind of tight little. This is only 4 issues.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're in the third act of 4 acts. But so much happens in it, and it has a great ending. He likes to end in not a flourish, but he will end something on a big moment that he's going to use way later. It's not I've captured somebody and they go to jail and then they get out. You know, the constant cycle in other superhero books. It's all part of the grand plan. I like we get Jack running through the city, and you kind of find I forget what did they say which neighborhood he's in? No, not in this one. But he finds the fortune tellers.
Can we just backtrack a little and talk about while he's fighting guys on the roof, a shadowy figure with a sword takes out 3 of them, hacks them up.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Oh,
and that's just a little that was one of the fantastic things about reading this series as it came out, was little things like that would happen. You go, oh, what's that about? And then you'd have to wonder about it for possibly years, I think, before this one gets revealed.
I think we get their hints in some of the times past issues. You go, oh, okay, that's who, or they'll finally tell you who it is. And again, it's all these heroes he's pulling from. During the fight, he's thinking about. I'm gonna go back a couple pages, but he runs off and goes. He has this line, goes, "Do other heroes? No other hero would be this dumb. Not even the corniest old costume guys from my father's time. Neon the Unknown, Stormy Forrester, the Human Bond. None of them would. Not even my brother would screw up this badly."
Yeah.
And I had to Google Stormy Foster. He's a quality character. It only appeared 17 times.
Wow.
And his superhero name was the Great Defender. And Robinson, when he was doing Superman, created a character called Von Hammer.
Yeah.
Who is the great grandson of the Great Defender. So I Googled it and went, what? And there's a picture of the Great Defender's great grandson fighting with Mon-El. And he's just a German private detective.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was cool. That he's giving you hints and clues, but he's also seeding characters that you may see again.
Yeah.
And then he goes down the alley and he gets to the fortune teller, who is, and then when I was reading this, I went, oh, is this Xanadu? I couldn't remember if this was Xanadu, Madame Xanadu.
Yeah.
And someone posted one, because I posted a picture of this character, Charity, who's who he meets, from where she first appeared in, which is, she was created by Robert Kanigher and Howard Chaykin.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she was the narrator, or the character that introduced this, I guess, horror or supernatural comic called, what's it? Mansion of the Unknown.
She was like the crypt keeper for that book.
Yeah, except for she wasn't supernatural. All it could tell me when I Googled her is she was a narrator, and unlike Cain and Abel or the crypt keeper, she wasn't supernatural. She was just a person.
Yeah.
But they had this great conversation about, like, he's like, how did you get in here? I know everything. And she goes, I just hired some very large men to unpack my stuff. And they have this great, I mean, it's a simple conversation, and you get to know a bit about her, and you get to know a little bit more about Jack. And especially when she makes, she says, I can tell your fortune and all this. And he's going to say, he says, what? Look, I got to Amscray this, but you're an interesting lady. I wish you luck and happiness. In the alleys for as long as you stay, but I got to get to my father. Thanks for letting me have a chance to catch my breath. And then she gives him some prophecies. You're going to be a hero, and you're going to fight the bad. You're with your father's invention, the glowing rod. You're a beacon for the weak and the scared within that darkness. I see you in the east. He makes a smart ass comment. Rhode Island, and no, the Far East. You're at a burial there. There's a blessing in needles and paint there too. You go into space, deep outer space. There are other worlds. You get to one and go to the one of them and hate every minute of it, and a winged man will come to Opal. He knew your father, yet and just vague stuff. I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's all stuff we're gonna. And there are images. There's an image of Hawkman. There's Jack fighting. There's stuff about the circus and a demon, all which are going to take place. Except the Hawkman part, that never happens.
No.
Is that one of the prophecies that he doesn't tie up?
Yeah. Well, he visits her again later, and she says, "Oh, the future has changed. You're not going to encounter the winged man yet anymore."
Okay.
And that was Robinson basically taking care of the fact that Hawkman's continuity was making it so the crossover couldn't happen, or the team up, or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a Jolly Roger pirate flag in there as well. So.
Oh yeah. More. Yeah, it's great. And I forgot they were fixed. This is when they were trying to retroactively fix how they screwed up Hawkman, isn't it?
One of the many times.
Yeah. That was that. I'm not one of those people that hates Crisis and what it did, because I was a fan of a lot of the stuff that came after it. But I do. Yeah. There was some where it's like, that just took an editorial meeting, guys. Come on, that could have taken about 20 minutes in an editorial meeting.
Yeah.
But then you get to see him with his dad, and it's just great. I love their relationship. There are some great moments, but it's just them talking about his father going, "Oh, so you didn't go," and I like that. I like that it's his dad's never. His dad knows he's the hero type.
Yeah.
And he knew David wasn't. And I think Ted's a little more upset with himself that David's dead and not at Jack. He acts like he's mad at Jack, but he's mad at himself because he knew Jack was the one that should be the hero.
Well, David wanted to be the good son and please him, and Jack didn't give a shit. So.
Yeah. And I think that's these scenes throughout the comic through the series are always so interesting because they're it's Robinson has a flourish or a flair to his writing, and it's not he can be very, I don't want to say, I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan.
Yeah.
I'm a big Stephen Moffat fan in TV writing. There's some others that I really like. And sometimes writers, they want to hear for like screenplays, they want to hear someone say their words. Their words to them are magic. And I think Robinson has that flair. I mean, sometimes is it too wordy? Maybe, but I like it. I feel it's always necessary. And he gives them scenes to deal with stuff. And like the dad going, "I knew you were alive. I just did, because I'm your father, because I was Starman before you. I knew." And Jack's like, whoa, I am not Starman. You were. David was. I'm just someone caught up in all this temporarily. I am not running from it. And at the same time, I'm not running into any long-term hero things. And he went, "Yet you went to the museum, son. Why?" All that. And then, Jack's like, "Because it was Mom's. I did that for Mom," kind of attitude. And I like that. And the whole bit about, "But I'm not Starman. Anyway, I need another cosmic rod." Really? That's just what I'd expect I'm not Starman to say. And I love that.
Yeah.
It's great.
But I mean, I think this dialogue works on a comic page. I don't think it would work, as performed by actors. Like,
oh God, no.
It's too stylish, but I think it's rich to read, but it's hard to say out loud. And I think that's deliberate, and I think it works. And I think, I mean, Robinson loves putting the quirks of the characters in the way they talk. But I've heard people say everyone talks the same, and I don't think that's true.
No,
But
Shade has a voice. Jack
Yeah.
has a voice.
Yeah.
Michael has a voice. Solomon Grundy.
Yeah.
You know, the way the Solomon Grundy, who's a star in this book, talks.
Yeah.
It's very different than all the other Solomon Grundys. And it's and because, you know, he's a plant-based monster, it's very flowery in a way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just little things too, like Ted is sitting there in a hospital gown, you know, and he's got a mug, and he, you know, you can see you know, he's flapping in the wind at the back, you know, but he still has his dignity, even though, you know, he's got a bandage on his head. But how many artists would bother to do that? They would just go, oh, what was he wearing when I, you know, blew him up? You know,
Oh yeah,
but
and what I like is Ted's frail.
yeah,
You know, he's been 0-hour aged.
yeah,
You know, when this is one of the times where they got rid of the Justice Society. And so he's, you know, he's now, this takes place in the 90s, so the war's been over for 50 years. So it's still reasonable that Ted's alive.
yeah, and he's got a skinniness that my dad has as an old man too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
where
my
the, you
dad
know,
was like that. He got really kind of like spindly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I see my dad, he weighs less. You know?
Yeah, my wife is teasing, you're shrinking like your dad. And it's like, be quiet. I'm getting old. I'm also shorter. Thank you.
Yeah,
My wife's younger than me. She likes to tease. Um, and she only knew my dad as this skinny, frail, you know, 90-year-old.
yeah,
But I do like that he's a little frail. And then we cut away to, um, he gives the son, he's going to give Jack some information to go to the next big set piece, which is what I like to think of this next couple pages. But we get to see the Shade and the Mist coming to an agreement that the Shade will help him in his plans against the Knights.
yeah.
And then we're back.
We should discuss the way the Mist looks too, because he looks like crap. I mean,
He
he's
does.
got
Yeah, he's like he's falling apart.
he's got a mist body, and he has some hands and a head that sort of connect to it all. Yeah, but his face is like blotchy and, you know, haggard and lumpy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point because in comparison, you know, the Jack's dad is frail, but it's the other head of the other family in this fight,
yeah,
and they're both two old men whose children are now acting out their war.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that because the Miss age and Ted's age become big parts of things you know, especially in this story, but you know, when all is, you know, when this arc is over. But I do like, um I remember the Mist from a couple appearances. You know, I knew him, but until this is where I realized this is all that I have of the. This is my starting point with the Mist. You know, he was just a character in a team up. You know what I mean? He was just a generic bad guy.
yeah.
Um,
My only exposure was in the Will Payton run, where he was. He looked like a sports coach.
did he? Actually, I haven't read any of the Will Payton. I read the stuff
Yeah,
that was in the Eclipso crossover at the end because I was reading that event. So when I kind of I bought a run during an entire run during the early part of the pandemic saying I was going to read it. And I'm glad I have not because I'll be reading
yeah,
it for the first time as I cover it.
yeah. Well, he goes by the name of Nimbus in that, because the Mist is a
Oh, I
not cool,
remember that. I
not
think
cool enough.
Miss is such a great name. And I have the two Golden Age archives and his stories in that, the two Golden Age Mist stories are pretty good. And this is more like it, less like the Nimbus and even less like, because he is the villain, one of the Black Canary Starman team ups.
Right.
Yeah, so I like how that all the scenes with the Shade and the Mist are this. It's all in black, and then this greenish yellow and white.
Sickly.
Yeah, it's very, very like very wet, damp, sick. Um, and the Shade is just sitting there. I'll have it. You know, he says yes. But before, and I love this as he goes, but before all the blood and death and unpleasantness, I think another sherry might be in order. And I was, and then it
Priorities.
cuts, and then it's on the bottom of the page is Jack thinking, I have died and gone to heaven, and it's in this big. This is like a Dick Sprang Batcave picture.
Yeah.
All the giant props from like whatever cases the Starman had. There's a giant clown's head, a robot, a swan of some sort, all the stuff. And he's looking for a locker his father sent him to, number 17. And he goes in there. There's a costume, and he's like, "Sorry, Dad, no way." And then he finds the cosmic rod, and it's an early cosmic rod. And Jack falls in love.
Yeah.
And it's a great design. This one's a little different. This is the first one where it's not curved yet. It doesn't have the hook.
No.
It's just a long rod, just a long version of the original rod.
Yeah, but when his dad said go and get this rod, he said it's a prototype. I had another one that broke in Washington, which that's surely the end of the Golden Age, the big confrontation with Dynaman.
Yeah. I think he kind of retro. People go, that was supposed to be a Elseworld, but I really think that Robinson was kind of going, yeah, it happened, or at least parts of it happened, which I like.
I think, DC eventually went, yeah, it happened, and stopped labeling it as an Elseworld, and then they reissued the collection as Justice Society, the Golden Age.
Yeah, that's the one I have because it's a nice, big, oversized hardcover, and it's beautiful. Paul Smith, it's just gorgeous. I'm going to cover that in the podcast too when I get to a certain point. I haven't decided where I'm going to stick that in, but I think it needs to be in it. But then we cut back to Ted's in the hospital room, and Witcher Dare is watching him. It's the cowboy, the one that we find out the oldest. Matt's going to become a big part of this story, and he's going to have a big relationship with the Shade, and this is the first time they meet. Yeah. And I like that. And he comes and he kidnaps Ted. I love the way Harris draws the Shade's powers.
Yeah. Like
it's monsters and ghouls coming out of his body. And I don't know, did they say that, I can't remember this. Is this the same thing that Nightshade, this is the same force that she controls?
I think they do link it in some text at some point.
Okay. Because it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I kind of like it. It's just kind of coming off him, and he doesn't kill anybody. The Shade. He just comes in and goes, "Hello, gentlemen," and he goes, "I could have killed you. I was certainly supposed to. Remember that, Carrot Head. And you and your kin, you're scared and you're bruised, and a couple of you need a change of underwear, but you'll live, all of you." And he's just kind of smart. It's just, he's great. And he has this line, and Jack, the thing he says about Jack, and Jack, this is all about him after all. And in the end, tell him what I said, tell him what I've done and what I didn't do.
Yeah.
Because in the last issue, Shade watches Jack fight and makes a comment that, oh, this is Opal's defender. He knows what's going to, he like Ted sees what's really going to end up happening.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then we get back to Jack talking to the Mist, and the Mist is taunting him. It's just great. And I love it. It goes, "Warning heard and accepted, junk dealer." It's a great line. And if you're still alive to carry out your threats, which brings us nicely to the next stage of the negotiation. You and your state of health and being are something my son Kyle and I have ideas about. Go on, I'm listening. And then it's kind of like this page is like a counterpoint to the splash page where he's first put on the costume, that he's standing in the wrecked hospital room, and he has this nice thing. This once, that's it. No more. This once, for my father, for my city, no doubt, no denial, and no mistakes. This time I have to try to be a hero. And it's just, at this point, it's like, yes.
Yeah.
It's a great ending. I miss, I don't know. Do you read a lot of floppies still? Individual
Yes, I do. Yeah, okay. I do, yeah.
I do a lot more online, but there are, and if you've listened to my podcast, I piss and moan about a lot of comics nowadays. You can't read them as an individual thing sometimes. And I think sometimes, this is a continuation, but this issue had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was a cliffhanger, but something happened. I love this issue. I like everything about it, and it's leading into a really great finale in the next issue.
It's a part of the story, but it stands well as its own issue. It has, development, and stakes are being raised. Like, it's really setting up the collision between the Knights and the Mist family.
It is, and starts building in the next issue. The dares get into it a little bit, and there's more and more, and we get more with the Shade. So all these characters are being introduced, and then they go into this final battle against the Mist family, and there'll be a shift in the rivalry or the feud, as it were. So I really like this. It's a good issue. It's really, I'm enjoying this reread so much because I'm rediscovering so much more about it. Is there a favorite part of this issue that you have, or something that sticks out to you?
I like the Mist when he sees his Ted. I like the shadows with teeth that are everywhere and that sort of stuff. Just towards the end, I think that looks brilliant, and it conveys. You're not sure what what the Shade's game is. Is he's grabbing Ted, but is he fully on the side of evil, or is he just playing along? So and the fact that he makes a point saying, "Oh, I didn't kill you. See."
Yeah, that they have poor Ted tied up in a chair with a wizard hat or a dunce's cap with a big star on it.
Yeah,
it's a nice little detail.
Yeah,
and you're not sure who would have done it, the Mist or the Shade.
Yeah. But, I really like this series, and I enjoyed the Starman series before this, but it the shine disappears as soon as you start reading this Starman, really. And I think that's what James Robinson wanted. I mean, he looked at the Swamp Thing model where no one cared about Swamp Thing. Alan Moore came on and just sort of reconstructed it from the ground up and built this world out of it. And Robinson wanted to do the same thing. He wanted something that a name people knew but wasn't beloved, and something that he could do something with. And he clearly has this love of the history of comics and the comics he grew up with and the things he read in the 70s and the 60s. So he wanted all that to be able to play with. And, he decided this was the best vehicle for doing that. And, that's why we all love the series, because he does that so well in it.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever seen this kind of repeated unless someone was creating a new character. You know what I mean? Or
there's a few things that come close. Like I'd say the Tom Payer Our Man series comes fairly close to it.
Yes, I'm a huge fan. That is a series I've never sold because it's hard to find, and they only collected part of it.
Yeah, and I think to a lesser extent the Kronos series they did was.
I like that too. I read most of it. This is so early on in the story, but I feel like we're seeing, kind of go back where we were just talking about Robinson's structure, and Archie as an editor. I mean, I can imagine he is shaping this a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? If Archie gives you some advice, you're going to take it. And they were very close. And I'd listened to your take on your show about it, that they were very close. And that kind of maybe when Archie passed, and I'd never thought about that, because that is about the time where the book kind of, there's a change.
It loses a bit of cohesion. I think Archie was the glue that held Tony Harris and James Robinson together.
Yeah. I mean, I still like the stuff after Tony leaves. I think it's just, it moves at a different speed, but I don't know. I'm a big fan. I cannot pronounce Peter Sinberg?
Snayberg, I believe.
Snayberg. I like his art, but it is so drastically different.
Yeah.
But
I think one of the real problems was they had Snayberg was an artist who didn't really want an inker, and they had an inker on the book that they didn't want to fire because they'd changed over the artist. So there was inking without a lot to add, because Sneyberg was sort of doing everything that needed to be done. And the inker had no backgrounds to work on or anything like that. So, yeah, it was a rough transition, and quite, a lot of people were very critical on the boards at the time when it happened. But it got through it. So, I mean, we've really gone beyond this one issue, haven't we?
Yeah. Well,
I should say, if anyone was on the Starman message boards, I was passable on the boards. So I was, very active there, and that was, that's kind of my online persona that has carried on since then, and I've discovered podcasting since then and things like that. But yeah.
So did the message board community, like, did a Starman little bubble start almost immediately?
Yeah, there were. It was kind of like, I mean, it was kind of like the coolest place to hang. And James Robinson would drop in regularly at the start, because he wanted to have conversations, not just about the comic, but about, stuff that he loves and things like that. So, and this was way before, social media was super toxic and detrimental to everybody and all consuming. So, I mean, it was just a nice little community, lots of speculation, lots of people bringing knowledge, saying, oh, I've read this comic and that ties into that, and lots of theorizing. I mean, I wasn't particularly one for theorizing because although I'm not tremendously younger than you, I didn't start reading comics till 87. So there's a whole, almost 20 years of my life where I wasn't reading comics. So yeah, not only did I start later than you guys, but like I don't have any pre-crisis love except for maybe Swamp Thing and Titans. So
it's like the first Justice League comic I ever remember reading is 100. Yeah. Which is the JSA JLA Seven Soldiers of Victory story.
Yeah, well, I never came to them at the time. I always came back to read them later out of curiosity, and that was my approach to Starman. So, I was all in on the Starman series, and then I would hunt down Adventure Comics issues with Prince Gavin, and I would hunt down the Michael issue from first issue special. So I pick things up retrospectively. I mean, I even got the Infinity Inc. issue where Skyman gets killed.
Oh yeah, because because the family's bigger. It's like Sylvester's part of this legacy.
Yeah.
Because I remember when the All-Star Comics came back out and Sylvester joins the Justice League. My brother gave them to me that right after he got it off the rack.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, oh, that's that guy I read one, a couple of years ago. I know this. Yeah. And I just loved it. I hated the name Skyman. And that costume is atrocious.
Yeah. No.
But I'm a big Courtney fan because when Stars and Stripes came out, I mean, I really loved that comic.
Yeah.
Because I read it and went, this is what comics should be. This is I could give this to a 10-year-old and turn them into a comic fan.
I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with. I like the history in Stargirl or Stars and Stripes, but I found Courtney's attitude just a bit grating, and it was interesting that they kind of revised all that out when they did the TV show to give you something much more, I don't know, easier to root for in Courtney. To make her. Much more
she is pretty much just an angry teen, which is a default, And I think Johns does so much more with her in Justice Society.
Yeah, that's where
she's a much better character. She's so good in that, and it's that Johnson. That is one of my favorite superhero team runs of all time.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a really cohesive, well thought out, a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah. But I remember at the time there was one guy on the Stars and Stripes message board who would just crucify every issue. And I think eventually Johns contacted him and said, hey, this is where the series is going. This is, the characterization you're getting now is just a starting point. She's not a finished character at this stage. She's going to evolve and grow. And that guy sort of backed off. But it's hilarious to think of someone of Jeff John's stature having to do that now, like single out one fan and just saying, "Please stop criticizing me. This is what's happening."
It must get hard. I mean, I think sometimes I'm one of those people when, I have opinions on stuff, and sometimes I keep them to myself because sometimes it's just like I really hate it. There's no reason I hate it other than I hate it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't speak to me. It rubs me the wrong way, or it just doesn't connect. It just doesn't hit. So I'm kind of like going, doesn't make it bad. It just means it's not speaking to me.
Yeah.
Also, like I slowly watched the Stargirl show, and I've enjoyed it. I've finished season 1, but at part of it, it's like going, this is very much the Buffy model.
Yeah.
And I understand why you use it, and it works. But also, I'm 58 years old, and I'm watching a show about a teenage girl.
Yeah.
So is it speaking to me other than I'm seeing characters that I like, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So Dave told me, watch season 2.
Yeah.
You'll really like it. And I enjoyed it. It just, I had to push my way through it because it hadn't landed. And Courtney's I do think the Courtney in the TV show is very good. That is not it's not like that's not Courtney. I said that's a better version of Courtney.
Yeah.
Courtney, because that's
the shade comes in season 2, so I think you'll really
that's
enjoy
what
that.
Dave was saying. The shade. So it's fun.
And it has more Justice Society members than Black Adam movie. So there you go.
Well, I watched that. My wife was like, "What did you think of it?" I said, "It was an okay rock movie." It's I think DC until I want to see what Gunn does. At least he's him and his producing partner are a little more professional. I don't because I don't think Warner Brothers and DC know what they want to do.
Yeah.
I don't think Zack Snyder, and I've liked some Zack Snyder movies and I dislike others. I think he's there's movies of his that I enjoy. I just think he's not focused.
I just think he goes, that's a really cool visual. I'm going to stick that in my movie without going.
Yeah, that's
what led to that visual that's important. Oh, who cares?
Yeah, he's not that's what there's a I prefer screenwriters who are writing the characters and they're worrying about the dialogue and the motivation, and they're worrying less about the set piece. The set piece will come if you write a good story.
Yeah,
and I think you're kind of right.
You can't kill Superman in his second outing because the death of Superman mattered because he had, that was about what's the world going to be like without Superman, and we haven't even seen the world with Superman at this point.
Yeah, there was something else, another one of these film things. I'm like going, oh, Brian, the X-Men. Every time they get to the Dark Phoenix saga, they give it to Bryan Singer, and you're like, did you read it? It's one of the most famous comic stories in history, and you've adapted it twice, and it's gotten worse. So, I want before we go, and before folks, I'm going to do. Paul's going to leave us because he doesn't have access to a copy of Adventure Comics 63, so I'm going to do that by myself. But before that, I went. Have you read many? Have you read any? You said you have like one or.
I have the greatest Golden Age stories ever told, and there's one Ted Knight story in that I have read, and I quite enjoy. And I thought, wow, the art in this one is much better than some of the others.
It's still Jack Burnley, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's issue 67 in that one. So,
it's a Mist story.
I can't remember. I'm going to read it.
I can't remember either. I've read that volume twice in the last couple of years. But... Yeah. All right, folks. Paul, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate it. Tell the listeners where they can find you on the interwebs.
I'm reading _Hicks, spelled Hix, on Twitter for now because Twitter's dying and it's kind of sad. I have the Waiting for Doom network, which is where you'll find my Doom Patrol show called Waiting for Doom with my friend Mike. And I also do DC OCD, which is about every single DC event from Crisis on Infinite Earths upwards, where we discuss them and rate them and rank them. And we break it down by writing, art, legacy and impact and eventiness. Like, how eventy is this event?
I think I need to listen. I'm one of those people who I don't hate all events, but
yeah.
some of them are great. Some of them are like
Well, I'm always pulled to events, and I'm always interested in what's going on. So I thought I would harness that knowledge by covering them all. But I've had some fantastic guests on episodes to get a good score out of 100 for each one, because I don't want to have people on who hate the event. I want to find that weirdo who likes the event and have them on to give it the best chance.
No, I gotcha. I think I'm first generation event person because I was a freshman in college when Crisis happened.
Yeah.
So I got issue 12 at a 7-Eleven after an all-night bender. I went into the 7-Eleven to get a hot dog and a chocolate milk to settle my stomach before I passed out. And I stayed up and read Crisis 12.
Yeah, that'd be mind-blowing at the time.
It was. And I was a Perez fan because I kind of discovered I read him when he was doing Man Wolf and his first Avengers. So by the time he got to DC, he was my guy because he is my favorite comic artist.
Yeah. And my other show is Dial F for Flanger. Flanger is my occasional nickname, and I just talk to whoever I want about whatever I want on that show. So that's
yes. I enjoyed your Starman episode very much. It was a very nice conversation.
Yeah, that was with Sean, who's a very articulate and smart guy. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, if you want to find me, Waiting for Doom, everything is at Waiting for Doom. We've got a website. You can find all our shows there. So,
all right, I will put links up on the interwebs. When this goes up, this will be up from when we're talking this Tuesday. I'll be editing tomorrow and Monday, which is good because normally if I'm doing it solo, I record and edit at the same time on Tuesday and then post it before I go to bed. Again, thanks for coming on. I'm probably going to invite you to come back when I'm kind of planning stuff out. And if there's a certain story or something you're interested in, let me know because folks, as you're noticing, I'm intermixing it. Next week is Prince Gavin, and then back to this, and then I'm going to read the first 2 issues of the Will Payton, which I've never read.
I mean, I can speak about anything post 60s.
That's cool.
So, whatever you like.
All right, I can't wait. I can't wait to talk to you again. So let's get to our TED adventure, and we are covering Adventure Comics 63. Let me give you some of the pertinent data from the Grand Comic Database. It was on sale 5th of February, 1941. It had a cover date of June 1941. Has a great cover of Starman punching the bad guy with a Sandman up at the top of the cover. I love these old Golden Age covers. The cover was Jack Burnley pencils and inks. The story, The Adventure of the Earthquake Terror. Writer Gardner Fox, pencils Jack Burnley, ink Jack Burnley, Ray Burnley source for backgrounds, that's his brother, Raymond Perry, and Betty Bentley. Characters, Ted, Doris Lee, Woodley. There's introducing Professor Moreau and Captain Vroom, the villain. And let's give you the synopsis from the DC database. From a secret base in South America, in the land beyond the clouds, science terrorist Captain Vroom, V-U-R-M, Vroom, has been using advanced equipment to inflict repeated simultaneous earthquakes hundreds of miles away all across America. Vroom is working for some unnamed foreign masters, and his purpose to make the nation ripe for conquest. FBI Agent Woodley Allen investigates, assisted by Professor Moreau. Allen's niece, Doris Lee, stows away aboard Allen's airplane, which is brought down in South America, at the land beyond the clouds. All three of them are captured by Captain Vroom. Allen calls in Starman, who frees the captive and smashes the captain's main machinery. Vroom unleashes a monstrous Tigron on himself and unsuccessfully uses his backup earthquake machine to try to kill Starman with a landslide.
Also to no avail. Starman, Doris, Woodley, and the Professor escape, but Verme perishes. Well, it's another one of these great non-paid stories. It starts with a great panel. It is a green one-horned tiger attacking Starman in the cave, and it says, the mystery man of midnight uses the mystery man of night uses the potent powers of the gravity rod to combat a new scientific menace in the adventure of the earthquake terror. And it's got the earthquakes are happening. Alan's investigating. He goes to Professor Moreau. Doris and Ted go to dinner, and there's a little earthquake, and food is spilt, and Ted feigns fainting spell, and then Doris Lee runs off and stows away in her uncle's plane until they're called, when they're shot down, and Starman is called, and Ted responds. There's some dodgy natives. They look like stereotypical African movie natives of the 40s, but it's South America. Captain Verme is definitely a Nazi analog, a brown shirt. He's got a scar like a good German bad guy. But, he battles Starman, and the Starman battles the locals, and Starman then has to save Doris from the one-horned Tigron. That's what it's a Tigron. Duh, Ross. Tigron. Tigron is a green one-horned cat, and it's stupid. It's silly, but it's 1940s. Then Starman fights a giant local native. It's really kind of off-putting nowadays, but he frees Alan, and then they all escape. There's not a lot to say about this one. It's a lot like the last. It's a lot of fun. It's green. The Tigron's kind of silly. I'll put up some pictures. I have already put a picture of the Tigron up. So that'll be that for this week on Opal City Confidential. Thanks again to Paul. I'll have links to all his amazing podcasts. I recorded this later after me and him talk, and this morning on the way to work, I listened to the first 3 episodes of DC OCD, and he covered Crisis, Legends, and Millennium, which I have not read in years, but I think I'm going to go take a peek at it. But I'll put up his podcast addresses on the site. And you know what? On Thursday, we're going to have the 2-part Adult Legion story. And today, the day this goes up, the 28th of February, 2023, is the 65th anniversary of the Legion of Superheroes. Happy birthday, Legion. And, as always, be smart, be safe, be kind to one another, and read some comics.